And welcome back to America Decides. Special counsel Jack Smith says President-elect Trump would have been convicted if he hadn't won the presidential race. He lays out the evidence to back up this claim, this in his final report on the 2020 election interference case. Smith also alleges Trump blasted key witnesses and prosecutors during the investigation, provoking his followers to go after them. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree join us now. Gentlemen, great to see you. I know you've both been following this for nearly 2 years now, so we finally have at least a conclusion of this portion. Tom, I'm wondering what your main takeaways are.
Well, my main takeaway was Jack Smith was pretty clearly writing for history. I think in his view, he was ideally going to be writing for a court or speaking to a jury or presenting his case in a court of law. That's never going to happen. And I think he realized that. And so what he was doing was basically putting forth, committing to writing, committing to the annals of history, the evidence he uncovered. And then to your point, he also reaffirmed his belief that the evidence that he and his team had amassed would have been sufficient to convict President Trump. So I think he was telling the public, I wasn't able to bring my case, but if I had been, I would have won it.
Okay, so this is what my first question was. As an attorney yourself, how much of that, too, is, of course, he figured that he could get a conviction here. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought it. I mean, he mentioned in these pages, too, that they didn't bring the insurrection.
Well, and that would have been the real news if he had said, you know something, I don't think I would have won this case, right? In other words, to your point, if he didn't think he could win the case, he had no business bringing it in the first place. So, of course, it was redundant, unnecessary. But I think he wanted to signal to the American people that, you know, notwithstanding the outcome of the election, he, Jack Smith, believed that he had a winning hand here to play.
Yeah, and how significant it was that Trump won the election. Scott, to Tom's point, in the report, I want to pull up some of this here. In the report, Smith writes that, quote, after Mr. Trump publicly assailed these individuals, threats and harassment from his followers inevitably followed. I know you've been covering a lot about threats to lawmakers and public officials. I mean, this seems to stand out here. It's
a 137-page report, and you're showing page 112, which just jumped out of the report to a lot of us, because not only is Jack Smith articulating the experience of witnesses, investigators, prosecutors, and even the judge in this case. They were all menaced, all harassed, all threatened. But he seems to be making a broader statement of this is where we are right now. Those who defy President Trump and who are called out publicly by President-elect Trump are going to be subjected to menacing, harassment, and threats. That is a bigger picture issue, which we brought to some of the former investigators with the House January 6th Select Committee. We asked them, was this your reality? Are you concerned moving forward? Pete Aguilar, the California Democrat, says, yes, we will not be intimidated, but yes, that has been the experience of those who investigate. Then Benny Thompson, who was the chairman of the House January 6th Select Committee of Mississippi, told CBS News today he would accept a pardon if President Biden offered it because he's concerned of what Donald Trump will do next because of the investigation. Take a listen to more of Benny Thompson speaking to CBS News.
I'm from a part of the country where speaking your opinion used to cost you your life. When I hear someone about to be sworn into the presidents of the United States say he wants to lock you up for doing your job, I believe him. And so if for Benny Thompson that is something that's offered to me, I will accept it.
Caitlin, the clock ran out on Jack Smith. He's trying to make that case pretty clearly in his report. I think one of the things investigators would tell us if we asked them why the clock ran out, one of the reasons is because so many threats, so much harassment, it did slow down the process of getting witnesses.
To that point, I mean, this talk about pardons or preemptive pardons, if they do come, I mean, Tom, should those involved here in this report, Jack Smith and others, be concerned about any sort of retribution from this incoming Justice Department?
Well, I think they should be concerned. I mean, certainly the president-elect has made no secret that he intends to, at a minimum, suggest or even direct that these people be investigated and potentially prosecuted. I mean, he's been very upfront about that. To my mind, the real question is, what do the people running DOJ actually do? And it's one thing for the president to say these people should be investigated, these people should be held accountable. It's quite another thing for the head of the Justice Department or a senior official in the Justice Department to make a prosecutorial decision that there's an evidentiary basis to bring criminal charges and to bring that prosecution. That's where the rubber hits the road. And so I think it is going to be very interesting seeing what happens in the months ahead, because we know there's going to be presidential pressure, to say the least, applied to these people, whether or not they are faithful to the law, faithful to the evidence, and only make those prosecutorial calls that are justifiable.
Go ahead.
It's one thing that Tom raises, I think it's especially important in this context. You know, the prosecutors who brought this case, they're going to face the fear of retribution. But when they landed this report, when they submitted this thing and it was finally released overnight, that was the last step of this historic investigation they were part of, this prosecution of a former president for trying to overturn the election results. There will be no prosecution now. How many Americans, what subset of Americans are dissatisfied with how this final chapter played out, with an overnight release of a 137-page white paper on an obscure government website? This is not the final step many people envisioned, and we'll see how that lands politically over the next few years.
Well, I'm curious kind of along those lines. I mean, we know that Trump won't be convicted here or prosecuted any further, but what about some of the co-conspirators named, Rudy Giuliani, others? I mean, I would assume the next Justice Department, to your point, wouldn't take that up.
Well, I mean, those cases, at least for now, will survive and move ahead. But, of course, there's going to be a new sheriff in town as of noon on January 20th. And I suspect that one of the first things that the new Justice Department leadership will do is reevaluate whether or not they want to continue existing kind of Biden-era prosecutions or whether they want to drop them. So I think that will be yet another litmus test of kind of where this administration is going in terms of the administration of justice, whether or not they continue some of these prosecutions or whether they bring them to an end.
And, of course, Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi her hearing is tomorrow. And then, Scott, just quickly, this was one part of this investigation. There was another investigation by Jack Smith into the classified documents case. Will we ever see that?
It's possible this gets released to Congress, and that's a leaky ship if there ever was one Congress. It's also possible the litigation results in a judge finally allowing that report to be released if those co-defendants in Florida have their cases dismissed.
All right. Well, Scott and Tom, an end of an era, and we'll see about that part as well. Thank you both.